Hey everyone, Seth here. Quick reminder, if you want to contact us with a question or comment or whatever, there are a couple ways you can do so. Either you can go to our email at more.layers.podcast@gmail.com, or you can go to YouTube, use the comment section below the videos, or a direct YouTube message is another way you can do that. And just feel free to give us any questions, comments, podcast topic suggestions, whatever, shout out, whatever, and we'll try to get back. Hey everyone, welcome to our first recording in May 2024 for More Layers. I'm Seth Mariano.
And I'm Jordan Smith, and he and I are really excited right now because we are only, technically speaking, less than 2 days away now, if you're going by hours, until we find out what our next Artists Unlimited show is.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of our cast has been speculating, making predictions, what they're going to announce. I don't know. No. And so we were thinking of maybe doing at least real quick, sharing what our own are. And I'll let you go first.
Sure. My default guess would have been Susical because that was the one we were originally going to do last year before we found out that another school in the area was already doing it. So they may just uh, announce that one. Now, part of me, for the longest time, did wonder if they were just going to go with the one that they wanted to do last year. Why would they wait until May to announce it? Because usually we get it in March or April. We've gotten it as early as February before. But then somebody that we know brought up a valid point is that maybe they wanted to make sure if they were hypothetically doing Susical that they had permission to do it, like no one else was doing it, so there wasn't going to be any conflict, and there were probably a bunch of details behind the scenes. So it's definitely a distinct possibility, but I'm not entirely sure. It could be the most likely one, but yeah, I'm not entirely certain on that.
Yeah. Well, mine's kind of a toss up between three, and specifically High School Musical, Frozen, or Beauty and the Beast. I'm not sure about the likelihood of either of those, but that's kind of what I'm going with right now.
Well, does Frozen have,
Yeah, it does.
like, I know there's a junior version. I didn't know like the rights to for it off Broadway had happened.
I don't
Um,
know whether or not. I really don't know. It's like this is just a speculation, so I don't know if
sure.
they would even be able to or not. So
It's a possibility. I just don't remember if the non-junior version has been released to the public yet. Um, in terms of Beauty and the Beast, that would make sense in a way because there was an 8-year gap between the times that we did Mary Poppins, and now it's been 8 years since we did Beauty and the Beast. So I don't know if that was your reasoning.
now I can't say why, but I'll kind of once they reveal what it actually is, I'll kind of explain that a little bit more, probably.
Sure.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of High School Musical, that would be fun because that was a show that they've only done before I got there, at least. Um, I'm not sure if all the directors were fond of doing that one, but that doesn't mean they wouldn't. Um, but while I'm thinking about it, another toss-up idea that I just had is maybe they'll do Annie. And I say that partly because that one's also not been done with us in a while. But the school where we do our theater productions now, they just did it. So I'm thinking if we do it later in the year, they already have a lot of like set pieces or props or costumes or whatever there. Like they're already set and ready to go. So maybe we'll just borrow a few things because we've done that before. Um, But yeah, High School Musical or Annie, I feel like could work.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Did you see Annie?
I did not. People told me it was really good, but I did not get around to seeing it.
Yeah, I did. I did go to one Saturday show. It was for the most part, I think, a good show.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, something you probably noticed. All my guesses were Disney's. Speaking of Disney, this is kind of the big topic, and I'm sure there are probably a ton of you out there who are looking forward to seeing this. The new Disney Plus documentary on the legendary puppeteer Jim Henson, titled Jim Henson Idea Man.
And if the name doesn't sound familiar to you, it's almost guaranteed that some of you out there would recognize some of the characters that he's worked with, like Kermit.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a good chance like most everybody who listens to this and most everybody that we know, at least in our age group, has a pretty solid familiarity with the whole Muppet franchise. I know I watched a bunch of Muppet stuff growing up. I don't know about you, but yeah. So yeah, it was definitely a big part of my past.
Isn't there also a promotional image that shows Jim Henson like holding a Kermit puppet?
Yeah.
Like they're looking at each other or something?
I think that's like the thumbnail for the documentary trailer, which I just watched. Yeah, and yeah, I think I might know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is honestly something I've been looking forward to, not just because of like who he is and what he did, but it kind of goes in line with Stan Lee. Like the two of them have created such a legacy, these wonderful stories and characters. And Stan Lee got a documentary of sorts not too long ago. So I figured, why not do Jim Henson now? And sure enough, that's what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Was there like a go-to or favorite like Muppet film you had like as a kid?
I think one of the most common ones my family and I would watch would have been Muppets from Space. In fact, I have that on my DVD rack back here. I don't know if it's just because that was one of the few Muppet movies we owned, but I know I enjoyed it. I found it to be very fun, very goofy. I love some of the references and whatnot. But yeah, that was definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't say honestly, I think it was probably that's probably the one that is probably the least ingrained in my memory. I mean, I think watched it at one point or another, but honestly, I think like my maybe my favorite growing up and probably to this day would be Muppet Christmas Carol. It's such a and I'm probably preaching to the choir here when I say this. It's probably one of probably one of the best takes on the Christmas Carol story that I've seen. Aside at least from the one that's done like every Christmas season at the local Jiva theater in our area, which side note I recently saw for the first time. I thought uh, it is one of the best things I've ever seen.
Yeah, I still have to go see that because they do it every year or every other year, and people always tell me it's really good. So I definitely got to get down there and see it myself at some point. Um, but saying that the Muppet Christmas Carol is one of the best adaptations of the Christmas Carol story, that's saying a lot because I don't think everybody realizes how many different takes on that story there are out there.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some that have been done like in animation with like Disney and other studios, and
Mhm.
some other live action films. Like there was one with Jim Carrey, one with Mickey Mouse. There's been a ton of them, and there are not too many of them that I can say that I've overall liked. This one, it ranks high for me, I'd say.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree. In fact, I would say Christmas Carol is kind of like the story of For example, Treasure Island, which, by the way, the Muppets also did,
Oh yeah.
because there's multiple iterations of that story being told. Like Treasure Planet is like a space version of that. But yeah, Muppet Treasure Island, aside from Muppets from Space, I'd say would be the other one that I watched a lot.
Yeah. So Space and Treasure Island, those were like the most frequent ones for you?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And maybe this will jog your memory a little bit. I don't know
Okay.
if it will because you already said it's been a while since you've seen it. But Muppets from Space centers more so around Gonzo and trying to figure out where he came from or who and what he is. So a lot of the movie is him trying to find out who his family is and where they are.
Right, I did remember that. Yeah. That whole basic plot. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting time, May 31st, this documentary is coming out. It's a whole 20 years since the Walt Disney Company first acquired the rights to the Muppets, and 2 weeks from the day we're recording this, it's going to be the 34th anniversary of Jim Henson's death.
Mm. Can't believe it's been that long.
Yeah, 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 and kind of it kind of makes it. I think potentially it'll probably make it sting more emotionally, this new movie, because even from the look of the trailer that you can see on YouTube now, it felt like almost like a funeral service in a way. The music, the stories that we got little tidbits of. I feel like there's going to be some pretty heavy stuff. I think if you ever get to see it, it's probably going to sting a lot.
It very well might. And even though I haven't seen this documentary yet, obviously, because it hasn't come out yet, it immediately makes me think of when Chadwick Boseman passed away, the guy who played the Black Panther in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, among many other things. Because he was supposed to be in the Black Panther sequel, Wakanda Forever, but then, of course, he unfortunately passed away. So they dedicated multiple scenes in that movie to just kind of focusing on him, like focusing on his memory. And a lot of those scenes, when they just showed footage of him, were dead silent. Where there was no background music, no sound effects, no nothing. And that really was a tearjerker, a gut punch. So, based on what you're saying, it sounds like they might do something similar
Mm,
with Jim Henson.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I was thinking about stuff that if I do hypothetically get around to actually watching it, I don't really have Disney Plus anymore, but if I do by some chance, let's get around to actually sitting down and watching this, there are a few things I think should be in there, in my opinion anyway.
Hmm.
I like to I kind of referred to this just briefly just a moment ago. His like relationship with the Disney company. He This was something that was kind of a big thing toward the end of his career, like the Disney company, like more specifically their head Michael Eisner had tried for a long time um, to potentially buy the Jim Henson Company or buy the Muppets, and of course, if you know your history, you know that Disney did kind of distribute at least a couple of their movies, a couple of the Muppet films, Treasure
Hmm.
Island and Christmas Carol. But but more because I feel like there's almost a similarity in terms of like prolific career and visionary artistry between Jim and Walt Disney. I feel like they were kind of on the same scale in a way. Something so a little bit on relationship with Disney, I think would probably be worth exploring.
Now, are you talking about Disney the man or Disney the company?
Well, more the company, I'd say.
Okay, because my question in that case is like, where in the documentary do you think they should put that? Do you think they should put that right near the end?
Yeah,
Or
yeah. I guess like depends on where in his career timeline it would technically fall. I would say.
Well, sure, because if it's focused on him, then I feel like it should go, for the most part at least, like in order of the events that happened in his life leading up to something like that.
Yeah, yeah. I would also be interested in seeing like kind of his early life to kind of get an understanding of, what fueled his ambition, what inspired his dream to make these different unique kind of puppets that we'd never really seen in Hollywood or whatever before, and kind of see, where his drive, where his passion came from, and that kind of thing.
Generally speaking, when talking about someone in their career, one of the most interesting aspects is how they got started.
Yeah.
And it's certainly no different here. I know, at least in terms of puppets, I think one of his earliest experiences with that, at least that we've seen, was those Wilkins coffee ads,
Right.
which were comedically brutal, but for some reason you can't help but laugh.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe that was like where kind of a predecessor for Kermit was introduced, and then maybe it kind of evolved into the Kermit the Frog we know, but maybe it's at least a guess.
Yeah, that's been a common speculation that people have had, if for no other reason, because Wilkins does kind of look like a prototype of Kermit, if you will.
Yeah.
Similar body structure, maybe a little bit smaller, but I feel like there was some official confirmation, but maybe I'm remembering that wrong. But yeah, they do look very similar, so I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. Well, and then one thing I think we kind of got a little taste of this in the trailer. There, kind of like to see them touch on his friendship with Frank Oz, who was kind of one of his key collaborators on a lot of the Muppet projects, and a frequent, regular co-puppeteer, and responsible, I think, for doing the original performances of characters like Miss Piggy and others. And Oz himself actually went on to become a bit of a successful filmmaker in his own right, directing films like The Indian in the Cupboard and Little Shop of Horrors, the 1986 movie.
Yep.
And I feel like, and I feel like that probably wouldn't have been possible for him to have his own established career here had it not been for his involvement with Jim Henson. In a way, I think it might have more or less prepared him for that. And I feel like because of that, and because they were so close collaborators and all, I would kind of like to kind of see what their relationship was really like.
Oh, that definitely would be interesting to see, and it's really a great example of someone being in the right place at the right time because they knew the right people.
Yeah.
And I know he provided the voice of at least three, possibly four Muppets, like Miss Piggy, like you said. I know he also did Animal. I think he did Fozzie. I'm not sure if he did Pepe or not, or Rizzo, but I know he did at least those three. Um, yeah, Frank Oz, like Jim Henson, both are really well versed in puppets. Like even if he wasn't doing something with the Muppets specifically, Frank Oz is also well known for doing characters like Yoda.
Yes, yes, I was gonna say that. Yeah, Yoda in episodes 5 and 6, and then I believe he did the voice after that, after he kind of become all computer animated.
Yeah, I think when they brought Yoda back for the prequels, Frank Oz still did it. I'm not sure if he did it again for the sequel trilogy when he showed up for a little bit, but I want to say he did. I'd have to look that up.
Yeah, yeah, and then of course, well, the probably people remember most about the Muppets is the versatile cast of characters. In a way, uh, well, you could probably describe these characters as like eccentric, very colorful personalities, and they had their little trademark traits and whatnot. And you know, I feel like it takes a very good creative mind or a very observant mind to come up with these character personalities like that. And I've kind of like to see where Jim Henson or whoever got these ideas.
I wonder if it's possible that many of them were created because possibly, I don't know if he did, but possibly had some love for animals. Because I feel like most of the Muppets he has were animals. Like Kermit's a frog, Miss Piggy is a pig, Fozzie's a bear, Pepe is a king prawn. Really, the one of the few characters I can think of that wasn't based off an animal were like the Swedish Chef and Gonzo.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, he's. It would be interesting to see how some of them got created. Like we could possibly get an official confirmation that Kermit was based off, or rather, of later version of Wilkins. Um,
Yeah, I think all I know about Kermit's origin story is that the puppet was like created from a coat and ping pong balls. Well, it's because that was mentioned in the trailer, but other than that, I don't think I know anything.
that is kind of lightly amusing, only because I remember as a kid, I always said that Kermit's eyes looked like ping pong balls, and apparently that's why, because that's what they actually used.
Yeah, yeah. And then of course, not on- only was but he wasn't the only one in his family who was involved in these operations. Very much, he he had a wife who was also involved, but also, his kids at some point got involved in the company, and one of his sons ended up actually directing a couple of the films. After I think maybe he directed the first couple of films after Jim passed on, and just I think pretty much all four of his kids and have served in like executive or filmmaking or whatever positions at the Henson company since he's been gone. So I
It
feel
would
like I kind of like to maybe know a little bit more about how the kids got involved.
Sure. How many kids does he have?
Um, I think four.
Oh wow. Honestly, I had no idea. But it would be interesting to see because it's almost like the kids could be turned into a subplot of sorts for this documentary. It's like we're focusing mainly on Jim Henson, but we'll also have a little section to show how his kids or the rest of his family were involved in the future after he got started.
Yeah. And then I thought about, well, how even the plots for these films, like Muppet Movie and Muppets Take Manhattan, which were probably a couple other high ones on my list, how uh, where those ideas came from? Did they come from like personal experiences or from nostalgia for films or what? What exactly? What specifically? I kind of want to know.
Well, in terms of most art, I feel like the makers behind them will get their inspiration from something, someone, or somewhere. So it could be a combination of some of these things. Like maybe he created the Manhattan one because he spent some time in New York City and felt like he could tell a story there. Or Muppet Christmas Carol, maybe he just liked the Christmas story so much and he wanted to put his own spin on it. But yeah, there's a good story behind each of them, and I would also love to hear them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, either way, I think whether any of these things are included in the documentary or not, I think we can expect um, something very powerful and reflective. I mean, this guy is pretty much responsible for like changing the way we look at puppetry. I feel like up to this point, as far as I know, no, it was all like wood marionettes and that kind of thing. But now we because of him, because of his innovative artistry, we've got characters that there's puppet characters that can express more versatility of emotion, that can be more flexibly coordinated, and and they feel very much like real people and not just like well, like a kid playing with a toy or something.
Oh yeah, some of the best ventriloquists out there, or some of the more popular ones out there, like Terry Fader or Jeff Dunham. Some of them are just so good that you kind of forget there's only one person talking up there.
Or forget that it's a person talking and not some like colorful character made out of plastic or whatever. You forget it's a human.
Oh, for sure. And honestly, I'm gonna go out on a limb a little bit here and say some of these guys that I just mentioned, they might still have a really good career, but had it not been for people like Jim Henson, it may not have been the same.
Probably not. And then we have our curious question. This time around it's what animated films and or cartoons would you like to see remade in live action, and who would you want to play which role?
Yeah, I definitely thought of a decent amount for these, although I will say it was a little bit difficult at times only because uh, Disney, for example, doesn't have the greatest track record when it comes to live action remakes. But hypothetically, if the remake were to actually be good, like we knew ahead of time it was going to be good, then I feel like some of these could work. And the first movie I thought of is what if we did a live action Wally? Because I feel like you could definitely make some of those bots look real. Like I feel like it would pretty easy to make a live action version of Wally, even if it was an actual robot, which I think they should do. Um, in terms of who would voice him, though, I had a little bit of trouble at first, but then I thought of two. And the first one I thought of was Alan Tudyk. And I thought of him because he's done a crazy variety of voices. I believe he did characters like Hey Hey in Moana. And I thought if he could do a high pitched voice like that, then he could definitely do something like Wally.
Well, I was just because I wasn't familiar with the name, I actually was googling him right now as you were talking, and yeah, the one thing as far as I know that he was in was Resident Alien, which I just watched a little bit of because as my dad talked me into watching a little bit of it. It was pretty good, but
Okay. And then the other person I thought of for the character of Wally is Keegan Michael Key, who's been showing up in a lot of animated projects as of recent. And a couple of his more well-known ones, he voiced one of the I don't remember if it was the duck or the rabbit, but he voiced one of the two in Toy Story 4. And then he also did the voice of Toad in the Super Mario Bros. Movie. And that's really what made me think he could do Wally. If he can do something like Toad, then he could probably do Wally.
yeah, I feel like there's a pretty big similarity.
Sure. And then the other character for Wally that I thought of was Eve, because she's one of the other popular characters. Um, and the first person and only person I thought of while I was writing these notes that I think could do a decent job in a live action version would be Scarlett Johansson.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah, and she
Eve,
has actually kind of done like a an electronic non-human character before. I don't know if you saw the movie Her, in which she played like an AI system.
I have not. I do know of it. I just haven't seen it.
Yeah.
But what really brought this idea to the forefront was that Eve in this movie, she can be gentle, but she can also be really feisty. And I feel like Scarlett Johansson has played characters that either do one or the other or both. Like, of course, she's well known now for playing Black Widow, who has that feistiness, but she's also played some gentle characters like Mindy in the SpongeBob movie. And I feel like if she implements both of those things into this character, it could really work.
Yeah. 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 As far as I know, she's got a tough on-screen persona as a Marvel superheroine, and I remember when I saw again the movie Her. Yeah, yeah, definitely a good vulnerable performance in that one. So I think I would have to agree with her.
Awesome. And then the next movie I thought of was Monsters Inc., or just like the Monsters movies in general, like that one, Monsters University. Possibly Monsters at Work. I don't know. I haven't seen that one. Um, and while this is technically kind of cheating, I just said it would be good to have Billy Crystal and John Goodman reprise their roles. Because it's like they're well known for creating those voices. I think Billy Crystal even said Mike Wazowski is one of his favorite roles to do. So I figure, they're here. We've got them. Why not bring them back, even if they're just providing the voice? And
I
I
will
feel
say
like,
to be fair, I will say to be fair, once you've seen a film as good as that one is, and you've heard voices that are that good, it's hard to really think of anyone else in those roles, probably.
that's another challenge that comes with live action remakes is that if for whatever reason you can't bring back the person who voiced them originally, either because they don't want to, they can't, or worse, they're dead, um, then it can be really difficult to recast them because some people are so familiar with the previous voice that anything different could just sound really off to them. And when you have voices this iconic, it's like if you can, you might as well bring them back.
Yeah, like they did that for The Lion King. They brought James Earl Jones back. They can do it with Billy and John again.
I would have to agree, yeah. Then the next one I thought of, while this is mostly a television show, it did start out with a movie pilot,
Mm,
Star Wars: The Clone Wars.
mm.
And I am aware that there was a 2D animated version that came out first, but I've seen very little of that. Um, but I'm thinking if they do a live action remake for Star Wars: The Clone Wars, bring in Hayden Christensen. Because I feel like recently, when it comes to shows like Ahsoka or just people coming around in general, people recently have really started to appreciate Hayden Christensen's performance as Anakin. Some people still don't like it, and they have reasons as to why. But I feel like this could be another chance for him to kind of repair his Star Wars reputation a little bit more. And what really helps support this is that, from what I understand in the Ahsoka show, is that he shows up briefly as a live action version of Anakin from that show. So I'm thinking, why not make a full fledged movie where he looks like that?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'd probably be kind of nervous about bringing him back, considering how harshly bashed the prequels were. But I feel like if, but I would be open to the possibility of having him in the role, though.
Yeah, the prequels were definitely bashed, but I don't think it's necessarily his fault.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, for one, he was only in two of the three, prequel movies because young Anakin was played by someone else. Um, but a lot of the things people didn't like Hayden Christensen's performance for were more so because he was given bad direction as opposed to bad acting on his own accord. We've seen in other movies that he can act really well. And even in the prequels, when he's not talking, for example, you can see the emotion on his face or what he feels. Or like when he's dueling Obi-Wan and he's not speaking, you can see the raw anger and hatred he has for this guy. So it's like when he's given dialogue, yeah, it does get a little silly or ridiculous at points. But again, that's more so the direction he was given as opposed to his acting.
Yeah.
And then I got a couple more. And this next one covers The Emperor's New Groove and possibly the TV spin-off of sorts, The Emperor's New School. This is an example of bringing a character back that can't be voiced by the same person because that person is unfortunately no longer with us. Although, I will get to that in a second, but when it comes to someone like Kronk, I'd say bring back Patrick Warburton. He's another perfect example of such an iconic character being played by such an iconic guy with a very recognizable voice. Because the thing about Patrick Warburton is even if his characters sound very similar to each other in different franchises, they still are very memorable. So I'm thinking, yeah, bring back Patrick Warburton for Kronk.
Yeah. Maybe just give him, a little more meat on the muscle and somehow make him look a little bigger or something. And yeah, maybe.
Oh, they have ways to do that in Hollywood, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And then the other character is Yzma, because you can't have Kronk without Yzma. Those two complement each other perfectly. Uh, but of course, we can't bring Eartha Kitt back for the role because she passed away years ago. In fact, I think she passed not too long after The Emperor's New Groove came out.
Yeah, I think the sort of spin-off prequel film Kronk's New Groove was maybe one of her last films.
Right. Um, so I figure if we can't bring her back, who can we bring in? And this one was a bit of a challenge, but I figured a good choice could possibly be Michelle Pfeiffer.
Hmm.
It may depend on how they direct her, how they take things, like what direction they want to take things in. But I've seen some roles where she can play somewhat calm and collected. But then I also thought of when she did Catwoman in Batman Returns way back when, who at that time had a lot of energy at times, could be really feisty, could be really insane, psychotic even maybe. And if she plays her cards right, she could bring a lot of that to Yzma's character.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking back to when you said Michelle Pfeiffer, her role as Velma in the Hairspray movie, and
That's also true.
it's a bit of a fuzzy memory, but from what I remember that was some pretty dark stuff. I think I can see it.
Yeah, I'll definitely look up some clips of her in Hairspray after that to really cement it. But yeah, bring the dark stuff in from Hairspray, bring the humorous stuff in from like her performances in the Ant-Man movies or something, and bring in the feisty, psychotic energy of Catwoman, mix them all together. You could get a live action Yzma.
Yeah, one interesting thing is Eartha Kitt herself actually was Catwoman on the old Batman television series. So
That's true. I
it's,
didn't even think about that.
yeah, it's probably not that far off a choice. Michelle Pfeiffer. I think that's probably one of the best ones you could pick, honestly.
It would be interesting to see if like on top of everything you just said, because then it could be like we've had two people play both Catwoman and Yzma. And Eartha Kitt, honestly, also happens to be alongside Michelle Pfeiffer. They're two of my favorite versions of Catwoman that I've seen.
All right, then.
And then the last one I wrote down is live action Tangled, because I don't know about anybody else, but I think Tangled has been wrongfully and heavily overshadowed by Frozen. Like Frozen has soon to be 3 movies in its roster, whereas Tangled has 1 movie and a 2D animated show, which I know next to nothing about. But I honestly like Tangled more than Frozen, so I figure Tangled should get more attention where possible.
I prefer it myself. I like both, but I give at least a slight edge to Tangled.
Yeah, I definitely would too. And I didn't think of too many characters for this one. I wanted to focus mostly on one, possibly two. Because I figure with Flynn Rider, you could probably bring back Zachary Levi or something like that. Um, but then I thought for like Rapunzel or the Queen, maybe bring in Anne Hathaway.
Hmm. Yeah, maybe Hathaway as Mother Gothel. I think I
Or
can. I think I'm seeing it now.
she can be any one of those 3 characters, like Rapunzel herself, Mother Gothel, or Rapunzel's actual mother.
Yeah.
Like we've seen in films like Les Mis that she's a phenomenal singer. So that is definitely one of the good factors for that.
Yeah, I was
She's
thinking back to I've seen Hoodwinked and the recent movie of The Witches, and what her characters were like in that, and that kind of helps me see it better.
okay. Uh, and the interesting thing with Rapunzel's actual mom, the queen, is that at least in the movie, she never speaks. She and the king never say a single word throughout the entire movie, but you can almost always tell exactly what's on their mind, exactly what they're feeling or thinking. And that could be something that Anne Hathaway could be really good at. But yeah, some of the ideas you gave, those make a lot of sense as well. Uh, yeah, maybe it would make sense for her to be Mother Gothel and not Rapunzel. Like either one could work, but I feel like she would be a better fit for Gothel between the two. Now that you mention it,
Yeah.
um, but funny enough, Anne Hathaway also played Catwoman.
Oh yeah, and I think it was Dark Knight Rises.
Yep,
Yeah. Yep. Saw that one.
and that's all the ones I had.
Okay. Yeah. I thought up casts for 3 films, specifically all Disney's. And the first one I've got down is The Incredibles, and it took me a while to come up with one for like every considerably large role, but I eventually pulled it out, and I landed with Brian Stepanek as Mr. Incredible. Brian is probably best known for his work on The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody and The Loud House, and those are probably his biggest roles. I guess I was trying to think of somebody who could maybe like, you know, who could be a little humorous and be firm depending on the situation, and I feel like he could do a decent job maybe.
Yeah, I haven't seen too many of his projects, I don't think, but I'm just looking at photos of him, and I feel like he really could, if nothing else, pull off the look of Mr. Incredible for sure. He does seem like one of those people that fits what you were describing. So I could definitely see it based on that.
Yeah. Yeah. and one of the hardest ones for me to think of was one for Elastigirl, but I finally landed on for that one Gina Davis. I feel like she when I remember watching her on screen in like the Stuart Little films and seeing how good she could act angry and uh, if nothing else, I feel like she could act firm, angry when it was appropriate, and yeah, yeah,
Was
definitely
she the mom?
authoritative.
Was she the
Yeah.
mom in
So
the Stuart Little movies?
yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
It's like
Yeah.
I was pretty sure, but based on that, I could totally see her doing Elastigirl.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think a lot of these were really hard for me, but I tried. For
Sure.
Frozone, I thought of like Denzel Washington. Feel like it got to be somebody black, somebody with a bit of spunk, I guess, a little bit of swag,
Mhm.
and take and some authority in their voice and I feel like Denzel has a good track record of doing that. So there.
Yeah, if, they don't bring back, Samuel L.
Samuel L.
Jackson,
Jackson. Oh, right. Yeah, I
maybe
thought about that. Yeah, but I don't know. I didn't want to go too like cop out, I guess. But yeah,
oh,
I could
sure.
see that too.
The one thing I will say is I fully would expect them to do the whole "Where's my super suit" scene in a live action remake, and if anybody aside from Samuel L. Jackson was saying it, again, that might be an example of, people saying it sounds a little off because it doesn't sound a lot like the original, but, yeah, I could still see Denzel doing it.
Yeah, yeah. And I thought of well, this is actually one that you suggested when I was kind of starting to think up things for Violet. Jenna Ortega, star of Disney's Stuck in the Middle and currently Netflix's Wednesday. Yeah, I feel like someone with a little bit of a moody, maybe not exactly goth, but pretty close vibe. A little bit of a gloomy presence, and but it's a similar physical look.
I was about
So
to say it was the look that
yeah,
really sold me when I was suggesting that idea.
yeah,
Because, like, when she does portray someone like Wednesday, it definitely reminded me a lot of Violet. Because at least I haven't seen too much of Wednesday, so I don't know too much about her interpretation. But Violet is a very moody, very reserved character for a good chunk of the first Incredibles movie. And I feel like Jenna Ortega could really have that come across really well.
yeah, probably. And then, I really struggled to think of somebody for Dash because I guess I just don't know too many like Hollywood actors who would be in the appropriate age as it is today. So I kind of went down a little bit of a rabbit hole search trying to find one. I finally settled on the current voice actor for Lincoln Loud, Sawyer Cole. So yeah, so just for that reason and nothing else really.
Yeah, I can definitely understand why that's difficult. I mean, even when they did Incredibles 2, they had to recast Dash, if for no other reason, because the kid who played him the first time had grown up by then because it took him 14 years to make a sequel. So his voice had changed. So they had to find someone who still sounded like Dash because the movie takes place immediately after the first one.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
definitely understand why that would be difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. I take and then for Syndrome, I thought of a little bit of a more nostalgic actor, Spencer Breslin. I think he's old enough. He's got to be grown by now, but I think he could pass for eh, just about any adolescent age if you do it right. I think my big reasoning was was because I remember like watching him in like live action Disney stuff and how he would deliver some of his angrier lines
Hmm.
and how he would sound yelling. I feel like I feel like that would be really fitting for Syndrome.
Yeah, I've definitely seen some of the stuff he did when he was younger. I don't know what he sounds like now,
Yeah.
but he definitely does have a similar energy to Syndrome. And I feel like he's just at that age where he could possibly pull off both the younger and the grown up version of Syndrome. At least the grown up version for sure. Possibly the younger version, depending on how they do it. But yeah, I could definitely see them pulling that off.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, depending on how you execute it, it could work. I mean, like, for both the younger and older versions in the original film, they cast the same actor, so
Sure.
yeah.
And I mean, it makes sense because then it looks like the same person just grown up.
Yeah. Yeah. And then for Mirage, who's kind of like Syndrome's kind of secret right-hand lady in the original film, kind of like kind of like the sort of Bond-esque femme fatale of the film, if you can say that. Um, this is probably one of the more difficult ones to cast, probably because it's one of the more obscure characters, probably not the most fleshed out or most focused on, and because probably because of her vibe, very like soft, sly, dangerous tone. And I ended up thinking of Salma Hayek. I think
Okay.
she has kind of a track record, I think, for doing those kind of personalities on screen. And it probably helps that I feel like like she kind of has the same sort of basic background as her voice actress did.
Okay.
So I think it's not totally out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I'm looking at a couple photos of her right now, and I would say she definitely can pull off the same type of attitude or energy that Mirage has. Like I could definitely see her nailing that role just based on some of these photos I'm seeing. Um, Another idea that I thought of just now
Yeah.
for a very similar reason would be Gal Gadot. I think that's how you say it.
Ooh, okay.
Like anyone who doesn't recognize that name immediately, she's done things like Wonder Woman in some of the recent DC movies. I know she's playing the evil queen, I believe, in the live action Snow White, which is coming out next year, I think. Um, yeah, I feel like Salma or Gal could pull it off.
Yeah. Yeah. And then probably the most difficult one to cast, well, aside from Dash anyway, probably.
Well,
Um, Agent Rick Dicker, the sort of low speaking, mm, almost eyeless sort of agent in The Incredibles, originally voiced by animator Bud Lucky. And I feel like, and I somehow thought of one person who would be in the appropriate age and has a very similar voice, Sam Elliott. He's
mm,
probably not known well by name, but you've probably heard his voice if you've like seen plenty of recent like Ram truck commercials, or maybe if you've seen something like I don't know whether or not he's in Yellowstone. I'd have to look that up, but yeah, I think it's almost a no-brainer. Sam Elliott.
I was about to say the moment you said Sam Elliott, it's like, yep, that could totally work for sure.
Yeah,
They may
yeah,
let him keep his iconic mustache, but
yeah,
it could still work
yeah,
pretty
maybe.
well.
Yeah. And then I also thought of some possibilities for Tangled, and I thought of I was trying to think of somebody who, again, wasn't Zachary Levi, uh, who could act goofy and could, I guess, sing pretty well. And I thought of James Marsden, For those who don't know who he was, Prince Edward in Enchanted, Corny Collins in Hairspray, and he's done some other stuff that people are probably very familiar with. But yeah, those were probably the ones that got the wheel turning in my head for that.
Yeah, he also did things like I forget the character's name, but he was in Superman Returns. But he was in Enchanted, where he was a singing prince, so that already qualifies him
Yeah.
for Flynn Rider. Of course, I would also know him from the Sonic movies.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, just based on Enchanted, I feel like I could see it because he does have that goofy personality in there. He's got the singing down. So that could be well translated to a Flynn Rider character.
Yeah. 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 And trying to think of somebody for Rapunzel again, other than Mandy Moore. No disrespect to her, she's great though.
Sure.
I thought of Sadie Sink, best known for her role in Stranger Things, and I think I more recently saw her in the movie The Whale. I feel like you need someone um, one with I don't know. I feel like they have maybe more or less similar energy and personality that I don't know, maybe.
She definitely looks familiar. I haven't seen Stranger Things or The Whale, but I feel like I must have seen her somewhere else. But based on your descriptions and some of these photos I'm looking at, I definitely believe she could be a live action Rapunzel.
Yeah. Yeah. Then for Mother Gothel, I thought of like somebody I need somebody with that same dark voice and maybe a little bit of an accent, and I landed on Haley Atwell, probably
Hmm.
best for playing Captain Marvel in no, not Captain Marvel, Agent Carter in like maybe at least one Captain America film, and then a self-titled Agent Carter TV series that was short-lived. Yeah, I feel like now from clips I've seen from like TV promotions and stuff, I feel like she's got that vibe that's necessary for that.
She definitely does. She has that vibe. I feel like she's got a voice very similar to Mother Gothel. So it could definitely work. I don't know how well she can sing or not. I'd have to see if I can find clips of her doing that.
Yeah.
Um, but based on what I know, I could definitely see it. I know for a while when people were saying like if Tangle were to make a live action version, a lot of people wanted to see Cher, I think is how you say it, as Mother Gothel. But
Oh,
I
yeah,
don't know.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know much about her for me to verify whether that would be a good idea or not.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think she's at least got the hair. I don't know if she's got the personality. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not.
She's got the hair and she's a singer and an actress, so that would definitely help. But again, I just don't know enough about her to really make a valid decision either way.
Yeah, I don't know. That's like, and then I thought of one. I think it's probably easier because this is a film that could have just as easily worked hypothetically as a live action film as it would an animated film, and that is Atlantis: The Lost Empire, another Disney film. And for the role of the cartographer and linguist Milo Thatch, the Michael J. Fox character, I thought of Matthew Broderick, whom I know from things like Ferris Bueller and The Lion King. I'm trying to think of someone who I guess who was in the appropriate age, has a very similar kind of like he can he can act mm, pretty for lack of a better word, or jumpy, I guess. And yeah, I think more vulnerable, I guess would be a way to put it. So Matthew Broderick as Milo.
Yeah, he's definitely played some goofy and or geeky characters before, so that definitely checks out.
Yeah, yeah. And again, then for the Atlantean princess Kida, very important role.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this may be one of the few major animated film characters that's actually been played by an actress who specializes in voiceovers.
Hmm.
Little side note, I think that's just interesting.
Yeah.
So, if it were to be remade in live action, I would probably think of maybe like the Chloe Fineman, again, star of Saturday Night Live, one of my personal favorite actresses. And she got similar look. She's known to do some pretty good voice and character impressions. So I feel like it's not totally impossible.
Okay, I could definitely believe that. Sure.
Yeah, yeah. And then Rourke, who's kind of like the main, who kind of ends up. I don't know if I can call this a spoiler, considering how prolific Disney's repertoire is. But Rourke is kind of like the well, ends up kind of being the big antagonist of the whole story, and he's kind of this sort of kind of kind of wisecracking, but can also be act so serious at the same time. I think someone who could do that well, from what I've seen from him, is Kevin Pollak.
All right. The name doesn't sound too familiar, but maybe I can look up some stuff that he's done and see if I can pick up on some familiarities. But for this one, I will be taking your word for it.
Yeah, I don't think. To be fair, he hasn't been in too many films that I think that most people would probably be as familiar with, but I feel like you know, he's done stand-up comedy and serious acting. I feel like um, he's just about equally good at both, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. And taken then for yeah, and then the next couple ones, they're pretty tricky, mainly because these characters probably aren't as well fleshed out in the animated film. But
Okay.
so this is probably more based on probably ethnicity and even a little bit more probably than the acting I know them for. And I thought of for the I think it's a Hispanic Latina character, Audrey America Ferrera. I feel like she's got a bit of a feisty vibe, a bit of a almost sarcastic, and I think America Ferrera is kind of that type of actress. So I probably consider putting her in that role.
I'm looking at a side by side of the two, and they definitely look very similar.
Yeah.
I feel like I recognize her from something. In fact, I'm looking at it now. She was the voice of Astrid
Yes.
in the How to Train Your Dragon films, who
Yeah.
also has that kind of energy to some degree. So yeah, I could definitely see it.
Yeah. And taken then for the I think he might have been, at least he looked black because of his complexion. Joshua Sweet, the doctor. I thought of just listening to the voice, it kind of reminded me of Samuel L. Jackson. So I figured, how about him?
Yeah, I for whatever reason, every once in a while, like I haven't seen Atlantis in a long time, but there's one particular clip I always come back to, and it's a scene where Joshua Sweet is talking to Milo and one other character, and it's like, you weren't supposed to tell me, but you did. And now I'm telling you, you don't want to know. So it's like, based on that, I could definitely see Samuel L. Jackson delivering a line like that.
Yeah, and then this was probably the hardest one because I don't know probably too many, I guess, more or less established actors who are in the appropriate age. I think because I think this character was pretty old in the original film. the King of Atlantis. I'm talking about specifically,
Yeah.
and it landed on Harrison Ford, who probably just because I think around 80 years of age now. So yeah,
Let's see.
I feel like you'd need somebody, I think, in of that kind of age. I mean, I think that would be the appropriate thing to do.
He is currently 81. He will be 82 in the middle of July. Um, and while I haven't seen Atlantis in a long time, I want to say that the king at times could be a somewhat grumpy character or like a grovelly
Yeah.
type of character when he speaks. And Harrison Ford is known for that type of stuff now, so that could match up perfectly.
Yeah. And also wouldn't be too far from consideration, considering that the character in the animated film was actually voiced by Leonard Nimoy of Star Trek fame.
Oh,
So it probably um, he probably have a pretty good shot of at least being considered.
yeah, I would definitely say so. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's pretty much all I've got, and that's pretty much going to do it for us. Again, thanks to everybody for watching, listening, whatever. Take advantage of the emails, the comments section, all the platforms that I mentioned at the beginning, and tell us about your thoughts on the Jim Henson documentary or hypothetical live action remakes like we've talked about, or anything else. Please share.
Oh yeah, any interaction we have with our audiences is more than welcome, whether it be about a topic that we just discussed, one that you want us to discuss in the future, or one that we've discussed in a previous episode. Uh, any thoughts you have, any questions, comments, concerns, let us know. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.
So long, everyone.